I'm going to introduce Laurie Provin, who's the Partnership Services Manager for the Center for the Advancement of Science and Space. The acronym is CASIS. And she works with the implementation partners and commercial services providers that enable payload to get to the U.S. National Laboratory on the International Space Station. Before introducing Laurie, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the CASIS family. They're part of the SSEP family, and Laurie, welcome aboard. The Center for the Advancement of Science and Space was enacted by Congress as the nonprofit overseeing the U.S. National Laboratory on the International Space Station. Now, you might have heard of U.S. national laboratories like Los Alamos or Sandia. There's a network of national laboratories. Well, there's one U.S. national laboratory that's 260 miles straight up to look at not only microgravity research, but the extreme, research in the extreme environment of near space. And we work with the Center for the Advancement of Science and Space. They're a national partner on SSEP. And just to tell you how important they are to us, not only do we work with them strategically to provide an understanding across the U.S. that there is an international space station promoting commercial access and innovation in space and STEM education, but they give us $100,000 a year. And that money is specifically used to close budget shortfalls to bring communities aboard. So the way to say this is that for us to do this program as a nonprofit, full cost recovery costs $24,500 per community, because every community has real payload going to the International Space Station, and that's not cheap. And so we work very hard for those communities that don't have the funding to try to help them find funders to get them aboard, because we don't want funding to deny the ability for students to participate in this program. And we might get close to the 24.5K and still have a $4,000 shortfall. And because of CASIS, we have the ability to plug that budget shortfall, and they have enabled tens of thousands of students to participate in this program because of that discretionary funding. So we're really grateful to CASIS for making that happen. So with that, Laurie Provin.
Thank you, Jeff, and thanks to Stacy for having me here. As Jeff says, I'm with CASIS. I am a bit new to CASIS, only a couple months, but not new to space. I've been around the space business for about 10 years. But I've been sitting here listening to the students and your presentations, and I just have to say, wow, you all are impressive. I can't even pronounce half the things you're talking about. I think it's a byproduct of my liberal arts degree, I'm not sure. But you guys are doing great stuff. And how about that, what I think, Jeff, is it 35 experiments going up, SSEP experiments going up tomorrow? Yay! So here we are celebrating the work you've done and celebrating the fact that even more experiments are going up on the ISS. So what a great time to be here, and thank you. I'm here, and they asked me to talk a little bit to you about the ISS. So I know a lot of you down there know already about it, so bear with me. But for those of you who might not know, we'll take a little journey on the ISS and see what's going on, if I can operate the thing. Ah, I can. All right, so here's the ISS. For those of you who don't know, it's a pretty big bird. You can see the model here. It's about the size of an American football field, for those of you that are watching the World Cup. The US has a module called the Destiny module, and that's where we do our experimentation and our astronauts are. The Europeans have one, the Japanese have one. Since 2000, astronauts have been living and working in the ISS continuously. So it's a pretty amazing piece of machinery. But in addition to the experiments that are going on inside the ISS, there are experiments happening outside the ISS, and we'll talk about a few of them in just a minute. So I thought it might be kind of fun if we just took a minute and breathe and think about what it is to be an astronaut and what it means to go to the ISS. What do you have to do to get there? What do you do once you're there? How do you get back? All those kinds of fun things. And so if you go with me and just kind of imagine yourself as an astronaut, and we'll take a little bit of a journey. One of the first things you need is curiosity. You gotta wanna ask questions and seek the answers. So that's a really important component to being an astronaut. You also need some smarts, which you guys have in spades here. You need to know your science, your technology, your engineering, mathematics. But most importantly, I think you're gonna have to learn to get along with people. The ISS is not very big in terms of the space that's habitable. And if you think your little brother annoys you in your house, imagine being with 5 other people or 4 other people and in this cramped space. So it's going to be important that you're a good team member and that you can get along with folks. So astronaut training, as you know, is not only highly competitive. I think the last astronaut class had 3,000 applications, which is pretty amazing, largest they've ever had. It also says a lot about people's interest still in the space program. But you have to train for several years, and part of that training is simulation. So you can see here that they're being instructed, the astronauts are being instructed on how to operate certain equipment and machinery on the ISS. So we're ready to launch. You guys have trained, you've done all the hard work, you're ready to go, your parents are there watching the launch in Cocoa Beach, ready to go, Banana River, all that area. But the first thing we gotta do is we gotta check in with Mission Control, which of course is down in Houston. You know, like Houston, we have a problem. And they're the guys that check out and make sure that the rocket is okay to launch. They're right there right now, aren't they, right? Because we're launching in less than 24 hours. And so they're on their toes right now. But once they give us the okay, then we can launch. And you got to get in the rocket first. Right now, we're launching our astronauts on Soyuz rockets. Pretty soon, we'll be launching them on American rockets again. But you can see, pull away, the countdown starts, you know, the 10, 9, 8. The engines are ignited, major pounds of thrust. I hope you guys get to see this tomorrow. Nope, it's not scrubbed. And then you have liftoff. And I've been seeing several rocket launches, and it never gets old. You know, it is just so cool. And you're not there very long, actually, in the launch phase. It's only about 8.5 minutes, which seems short, but you can imagine how nerve-wracking it must be, right? Because this has got to go. If this doesn't happen, nothing happens. And there's so much going on that even the littlest thing can go wrong. So it's really important to the astronauts that that whole rocket is checked out and ready to go. So here we are. We're going to go. We're up to the ISS. We're almost there. But you got to dock first. And you have to dock very gently. You can't just wham into the side there, because that's not going to help anything. And once you're docked, you're there, and you open the door, and voila, you are in microgravity. You're floating in space. Now you can see there are a lot of buttons and cords and all assorted kind of things, and you can't be bumping into those because that's kind of dangerous. So you see those blue bars on top and the blue bars on the side. Those are for the astronauts to hold on to when they're working or in a certain space. There's also some you can't see in this picture, but there's also some on the floor that they can stick their foot under, which helps them stay upright. You might float over, see your crewmates, have a little snack. Now, it's probably not as good as a snack you're going to have on Earth if you've ever seen some of the astronaut food. It's a little scary, but you know, you're an astronaut. You've prepared for this. And you have to exercise between 2 and 2.5 hours a day. One of the things we know is that astronauts, while they're in space in microgravity, lose bone mass and they lose muscle mass. So exercising helps minimize that loss. One of the interesting things I read that astronauts, the average astronaut, grows 2 inches while they're in space. And that's because you don't have gravity forcing down, so the spine actually elongates. And of course, when you get back down to Earth, it compresses again and you go back to your regular height. But if you're short like me, being an astronaut just to go to 2 inches would be awesome. And after your first day, it's been hard. It's been a rough day, lots done, and you're going to tie yourself into your bunk so you don't float away, and you're going to wear what might arguably be the world's ugliest pajamas. However, it's not too embarrassing because all your teammates are in the same pajamas. he looks almost like a vegetable or something in there. I don't know. It's like, wow. I don't know who designed that, but they need to talk to somebody. This is what you see the next day. I mean, this is inside the Destiny module. Wow. It's a little daunting. And every single thing in there isn't there just for no reason. Every switch, every button, every cord is there and has a purpose. So you're not only doing experiments on space, but you're helping just the ISS to run and to function. But you do get to do experiments like this one. This is a lettuce experiment, and I got to tell you, when I first saw this picture, I had to zoom in on that because that did not look like lettuce to me. That looked like some kind of strange alien maybe they had caught, or I wasn't sure. But that actually is lettuce. It's a kind of pretty popular experiment on board. And you've got to monitor it. So you monitor things like the moisture, you monitor the nutrients, you monitor the amount of light, just like you would on Earth, growing a plant on Earth. But the good news is you do get to eat it. And I heard some astronauts talk about eating this lettuce, and they said it was pretty bitter. Something about the ISS and growing in the ISS makes the lettuce pretty bitter. So if you think kale is bad now, I think that's really worse. You might do an experiment in the glove box, and this is for self-contained experiments, and you can kind of see you put your hands in those two circles there, and you see the black glove. You conduct the experiment, and you see the camera in the middle, so that camera is taking pictures of the experiment as it's being done, and that information is very helpful to the researchers. I don't know if some of you had that done maybe with some of your experiments, but it does help to have the photographic evidence as well. One of the interesting things you have to do is you have to do tests on yourself, and they monitor very carefully your eyesight. Astronauts report losing their focus when they're on the ISS, and that's because when we're in gravity, fluid goes to our feet, right? If you've ever had your feet swell after you've been walking a long time, you know the fluid goes to your feet. Well, in the weightless environment, it doesn't. It kind of stays in your head, and it can build in your head, and it can put pressure on the optic nerve, changing your ability to focus. So they're always monitoring that, and you're taking tests with that kind of stuff. And your eyesight's important because one of your responsibilities as an astronaut is to take pictures of both space and Earth. And this is called the Cupola Window, so you can look out it. And I'm sure you've all seen pictures like this and pictures from Earth or pictures like this and like that. This is actually, I don't know if it'll move anymore. I don't think it'll move. But anyway, this is kind of interesting. The space station goes very fast. It's like around 17,000 miles per hour. So you have to be able to take the photograph really quickly. So the astronauts do practice. And if you're like me and can't even take a selfie, a halfway decent selfie, then you need to practice taking pictures because you're moving so fast. But we get extraordinary pictures like this. I just love this picture. This is a volcanic eruption. And it's not only a thing of beauty, but again, the photos can help the scientists who study those kinds of things. And here's an example of a glacier. Certainly climate scientists are very interested in the photographs of glacier because they can see how much they're receding. And so if they're doing their climate work, that helps fill in the gaps, some of the gaps for their climate work. When you're in that cupola, besides taking pictures, there's also a very important job, and that's going to happen tomorrow. You've got to dock the SpaceX Dragon with the ISS. So you're going to help operate the arm that pulls out and pulls the Dragon in, and give you a better sense of that. That's the SpaceX Dragon. So you see that square under the word SpaceX? That's where the arm will actually go. It's a robotic arm. It'll pull in, and then it'll pull it closer, and you can see the arm there getting ready to come down, and then it pulls it in so it can dock actually with the space station. And once it's docked, you can open the door, and voila, there are your science experiments. So your experiments, or the experiments of some of your friends or classmates, are going to be on, just like that, tomorrow. They're going to be on the spaceship ready to go. One of the really popular and has been going on for a long time is rodent research. I don't know if any of you have done any bit of that, but we study rodents to study how space environment, microgravity environment affects them. We look at things like their bone loss, their muscle mass, there's changes potentially in cellular structure. So we have to look at all of that, particularly if we want to go to Mars, because we're going to be in space for a very long time. That's a long journey. So we have to understand how space affects the human body, and we have our friends, the rats and the mice, doing that. So if you're an astronaut, you're going to need to like mice and rats and stuff. Sorry to tell you that. But the good news is, if you are a rat, you get to come home. It used to be you didn't. They didn't send the rats back, but now they've built this kind of self-contained rat experiment case, and you get to come back so you can like party with your little rat friends when you get back. You might have to do some other kinds of experiments, like we do a lot of cell experiments. I think some of you were talking about that. In fact, there's a cell experiment going up on tomorrow, and it's going to be growing cells in space and potentially to use them for cancer therapies. So some extraordinary stuff going on. You might be asked to do some stuff that's external to the ISS. This is called the Muses Platform, and you send in these little kind of cassettes, and we can test materials there. So the space environment is really harsh, as you guys know, a lot of radiation, and so materials have to be tested to make sure they can withstand. So it might be a coating, for example, on a cord that you want to test. We've actually even sent up car paint samples because they want to see how well their paint does in extreme heat. So if it can handle space, it might be able to handle, Houston, I don't know, in the summer. This is a really fun experience. Have any of you ever done tomato sphere? Has anybody ever participated in that? It's really fun. They send up these thousands of tomato seeds up into space. They stay in microgravity for a while, and then they bring them back down, and they disperse them in classrooms throughout Canada and throughout the United States. The kids grow those plants, and then they grow regular tomato plants, and they do comparisons about did the seeds produce different plant results, the seeds from microgravity compared to the seeds from Earth. Over 500,000 kids have participated in this program, so it's pretty neat. And the astronauts really like this program too. This is kind of a fun one. It's a little bit near and dear to me. I actually worked on this project. This is called the Muses Platform. It's an external platform. It's a remote sensing. It looks down on the Earth, and you can kind of see those two big kind of square-like shapes and then the two smaller ones. It actually holds 4 instruments that look at the Earth, and the instruments go up separately, and tomorrow, the very first instrument is going up on the SpaceX 15 flight. It's a hyperspectral instrument that'll be looking at the spectral signature of things on Earth, like trees and forests and crops. So personally, I'm a little bit excited about this one. I can't wait till it gets up there and starts working. And cameras can give you images like this. This is Spain at night, which is just gorgeous. And in the background, that little green glow, that's the aurora, so you can see that from space. We have platforms that look up. This is the NICER platform. It looks at neutron stars that are small stars that happen because of supernovas breaking up and exploding, and then they produce these small neutron stars. And you might even get to read a storybook in space. This is actually called Story Time in Space. This is another project we're involved in that we love. The astronauts read children's books that have science content in them, and then they do experiments along with that, and they film themselves the whole time. And then that video is downlinked to the station and then down to Earth. And it is so cool, and you get to look at the video, you get to watch the astronaut, and then we have kits that kids can do the same experiment that the astronaut did on the ISS. So you've been busy, you've been experimenting, you've been sleeping in your funky pajamas, you've been doing a lot of things, exercising, your eyeballs going crazy, but you're ready to go home. And so you gotta do your checklist and do that, get suited in, back into the vehicle, ready to go. And you've got to separate now just as carefully as you made it. You have to separate. And you come screaming back in through the atmosphere. Fortunately, you eventually hit gravity, and it slows you down a little bit. And the other thing that slows you down is that. So you're glad to have a nice parachute to slow things down. But I got to tell you, you're floating, and then wham, you hit the ground, and it is a force. Even though you've got the parachute and you're gliding, it's still a force. And it's so forceful that they actually create seats, and they mold the seats to each individual astronaut. And that's so you don't experience any kind of excessive jarring because the impact is so hard. You can't walk when you get out. Literally. I mean, you've been in weightlessness, so walking is really difficult. So you have to wait for the guys to carry you out, and then eventually they gradually get you in. Astronauts say that their first walking experience, it feels like they're having to lift tree trunks when they walk, which must be an extraordinary. I kind of feel that way sometimes after I exercise, but that's and once you're completely done, you get to celebrate, you get to share the things you do with people like you and students like you, and you get to inspire people in the future. I'm amazingly inspired by all of you. I'll never get to space, but boy, do I love watching you guys try for it. It's really fun. If you're interested, there are some more programs we have at spaceexplorers.org. We have some amazing things. We're doing gene experiments in space. We're doing plant experiments. We have a ham radio experience. So there's all kinds of things going on there, and I encourage you to go to spacestationexplorers.org. And again, I want to thank you not only for inviting me here and being very kind and patient and attentive. I appreciate it. But I also want to thank all of you who are working to make this a better country. You give me a lot of hope for the future and a lot of hope for science and space and technology and engineering. So well done.